Disturbian here again with Middle Age Gaming, and I thought today I would do something a little bit different, and I would kind of quickly compare Season 1 with Season 2 so far. I mean, we're in the last couple of weeks, alright, maybe game devs let us know, but so how am I finding Season 1 compared to Season 2? Which one's the best? Are you guys different on your server? Feel free to comment, let us know, but let's have a look from kind of my own findings so far, the difference between Season 1 and Season 2. I'm going to try and be slightly positive, but that won't hold out for very long as we get towards the middle of the section, I imagine. Season 1 compared to Season 2, these are kind of like the general areas that I'm going to be looking at, sort of the excitement factor of the season, the wow of the game. How things go in world chat and social wise, the offers that have been available and special events, changes in unit balance, tweaks, game balance, mainly looking at things like factions, and then also looking at the map and expansion and growth. So here we go with that first one. I've not really scored them, but I'll just give a general thumbs up or a thumbs down and we'll see where we go. This is the only one where I have mentioned the mixed Season 2s because I'm not in a mixed season, so I can only mainly talk about roleplay. And I've tried to keep it positive in the first slide between my difference between Season 1 and Season 2 compared to roleplay. So Season 1 obviously was all about learning and the discovery of new tactics and what the game was about, how you relocate your base, how you build a fort, how you increase your zone territory, it was all this sort of funky stuff, and that's partly why I chose the roleplay server for Season 2, because I thought that the mix server was too different. It was going to be like a whole new game of trying to find those balances and working things out again. So I have to admit, maybe I did limit myself by going into the roleplay server. My theory was that it would be about evolution and adaptation of the skills and the units and the resources the methods that you learn in Season 1. Whereas Season 2 became more about new combinations and analysis, being able to mix the evil and good units and commanders. So there was a very, very different change on your Season 2. Let me know if you did play Season 2 mixed. Is that what it did become about? Obviously, because we're well into these seasons now. Is it about having that right mix, or can you get through the season just by playing entirely evil or entirely good? How much of a restriction, how much does it limit you when you come against people who can whack out sort of metas from both sides? I would be curious to know. For excitement factor for me personally, Season 1 wins hands down in this area. I had a lot of fun developing all those new things and discovering everything. I didn't play beta. I feel like I've been a little bit disappointed with Season 2 in that I thought maybe there would be more stuff apart from a handful of units and a few tweaks and changes. The maps remain the same, everything pretty much remained the same. I was expecting maybe something, to meet me halfway between the Season 1 and the Season 2 mixed. So for me, Season 1 was far more exciting. Looking at social engagement. Season 1 for me, you had very good factional awareness of roughly what the aims of factions were, of faction command. There would be maybe only 2 or 3 leaders from each fellowships dictating factions. You had less trolls, I suppose. I think there was a fair distribution of trolls. They did exist, but I could quite easily mute 3 people or so, and that would be most of my season. Quiet and easy to engage with the people that were remaining. Season 2 is a little bit more difficult. Factional confusion. It's very, very difficult to get an idea of what's happening, and even groups that have made agreements with groups tend to be like, hey, this fellowship is doing this, or what's going on here, I'm being attacked with it. There seems to be far more confusion and having to deal with fires all over the place. Also, global chat tends to be dictated by a lot more trolls, because obviously you've got 5 or 6 seasons, servers worth of trolls all merged onto one, so there's a lot more of people talking, tend to be just wanting to try and cause arguments and fights rather than just have fun and create a friendly chat environment. curses to me for trying to want something that's a bit more social rather than rude and offensive, but there we go. So Season 1, it was easier to get to know the server. There were fewer fellowships, fewer people, and it felt a bit closer. Season 2, very, very difficult to chat and communicate with people. It's an overload of fellowships, and for me, again, with social engagement, I definitely prefer Season 1. Maybe you prefer Season 2 just because there are more people and there is more communication going on, but there we go. Personally, for me, Season 1 again wins in social engagement. Offers. This one is tough because Season 1 had more chests available. With your progression and your growth, there was more things, more tier 2 and more tier 3 heroes able to unlock. I mean, granted, those chests came thick and thin because the server progression was fairly quick, and there was quite often times where you'd have 2 special boxes available at the same time. But there was more, and you could, if you wanted to unlock those 100 boxes, get a lot more of those tier 2 characters and items and equipments. Season 2, that's changed. You've kind of had 3 chests, and one of those was an equipment chest. We pretty much had the new guys and then just one other random one. That was a bit disappointing. However, Season 2 did have the Christmas special event with a whole load of free stuff and free gear and events to get a hold of, and we had the Christmas pack, and of course we had choice packs, which made the Season 2 slightly better in that you could choose anything that you wanted. You could buy those Christmas packs and get the choose any tier 3 commander. They were expensive, but you did have the option to get them. And the Season Pass also, for me, is what weighs things slightly more towards Season 2, in that exceptional Season Pass with the tier 2 choice unlocks, again, made them way better because you could specifically custom choose heroes that were really essential. And the fact that they haven't chosen to really balance the game, which we'll come up to later on, meant that you already knew which was good, it would stay good, and you could kind of count on the fact that Theoden would be amazingly good if you were playing cavalry, etc., etc. You didn't have to deal with the chance of getting something else that's rubbish. So for me, and the Season Pass did go on for longer, it gave you more stuff. So offers and Season Pack wise, Season 2 wins it for me, mainly because of the choice selection packs, which made them slightly better. Moving on to part 4, unit changes. There were very, very few unit changes from Season 1 to Season 2. They did occasionally tweak things that didn't really seem to make a huge load of difference in the game. Season 1, you clearly had weaker evil combat units, but stronger evil siege. Okay, fair enough, if that was what the theme was going to be thematically for the season. Okay, fine. You can let evil do better at certain areas and good do better in other places. Season 2 brought no new main units, no matter which server you're on, whether you're on the roleplay or you're on the mixed. Either you just still had the same units, or you could use both sides' units, but there was nothing new and exciting. And they only added 3 or 4 new special units, probably to rebalance the distribution of units around the map. But that was also kind of disappointing, and for this reason, I'm going to allow Season 1 the winner to this, because they didn't need to bring anything new. Everything was new. Everything was exciting. You were getting used to those units, and fair enough, we had to deal with that balance. Season 2 did not really address anything for me. The balances were not really overwhelming, okay? They did things like Oathbreakers. They basically made them, in my opinion, fairly irrelevant. But they didn't balance a whole lot of the other special units, which I probably would have preferred, especially things like Mummer Kills, say. So, Season 1 for me wins this because Season 2, there was nothing that was really done about the problems in Season 1, and nothing really changed. Going on to the faction game balance. I was not too surprised, and people who've watched my videos from before when I was discussing about how changes would occur, especially my criticism of being able to change factions well into the season, you would have seen that I kind of expected the fact that from Season 1 having 1 super faction, or maybe 2, 1 evil and 1 good, would eventually just change over to maybe having 2 or 3 super factions. No surprises, this is what seems to be happening on most servers. 1 mega evil faction, maybe 2 good supersized factions, and then maybe 3 or so medium-sized factions kind of just trying to pull their weight or doing well when they're not being targeted full on. So that's just how things progressed. unsurprisingly. A ring overwhelmed by one or maybe two factions if you were looking on your Season 1. Mainly pretty much everywhere where I was looking, it was pretty much just one faction that we're only really ever going to be able to control and hold it for a long time. Ring 2, Season 2 does have more ring insecurity in that nobody really seems to be in a position where they look overwhelming or dominating on most of the servers. I'm not saying there are some where still there is one faction that's obliterates everyone that I've seen the map for. That has happened, but I'm talking about on most servers and on my server that we're on 0002. What is happening here? We can have 2 or 3 super factions. Angmar, Rohan, and Linden seems to be the 3 mega ones, and then you kind of have sort of like 3 mediocres with Lothlorien, Gondor, and Mordor. You again post and let me know if similar has happened on your server. I would be curious to know. How that has affected politics is that Season 1, we ended up with mostly the world versus one faction. On most servers you were talking about, this ended up to be the case. Season 2 has changed in that it's mega alliances being blocked and 2 or 3 groups working together, becoming one mega block, and pretty much forcing maybe 2 or 3 of the other side to block against them to pretty much create 2 World War I, World War II-esque style axis versus, you know, the coalition of powers trying to fight each other. And as a result, we've also kind of experienced a clearer faction command in Season 1 in that the goals and aims were easily dictated by a few figures and generally leaders, and the rest of the faction followed on. Season 2, that's become a little bit more vague. You've kind of got fellowships doing their own on more occasions, and these individual accounts of people not following or adhering to rules is far more common. The final thing that I was looking at is game balance of the map, Season 1 versus Season 2. Sorry, the last one, whether I thought who won on factions. I would probably say that's probably fairly even in my opinion. I'm not entirely sure which one I like, the idea of super factions. And again, I keep campaigning and will always campaign for the removal of faction switching. I think it's not very good, and I think with this whole new change to vassal states, I think they could do that for the good guys. They could just eliminate people, because at the moment we do have this huge problem where everybody's just switching sides to 1 or 2 factions early on. That should be removed. If you choose that faction, go with it. No just switching sides just because one side is more powerful than the other. So for me, it's kind of a score draw until that gets removed, because the rest is irrelevant. This will always happen. As for the map, Season 1, huge expansion areas. Not just that, but those territories were quite weak. You could take some of those small cities. I took many cities on my own, as I've proved in the videos. It was super easy. You could just tile through to an area, and towards the end, when people were fighting for rings or for territories, it was very easy to sneak in through the back doors and be taking certain territories and going as you were. It was kind of funny. You could see a lot of things changing in the dynamics and the world map. It kind of was quite funky in that you had more power as a smaller group. In Season 2, it's far more difficult to expand those. All those territories have been increased in value. Of course, you can still have an impact as a player, and I've still seen it happen where people have sold cities. That's not too problematic. The difficulty is that it's more difficult probably to control those areas, because there's far more people, and the impact of a smaller group or a few people is less when there are fact that there are maybe 500 active people in a group. You can easily be counted, rather than back in Season 1 where there were maybe 100 or 200 active people, and you could kind of be a little bit more dictating as a small group. 3 or 4 people, you could cause absolute anarchy and havoc. As a result, Season 1 was more trench warfare based. I'm pretty sure it probably happened in yours as well, where you just end up with these huge, almost pages and pages of forts being held to blockade sort of main routes or main areas. That's not quite been the same, I've noticed, in Season 2. I have seen trench wars, but I've seen them fall very, very quickly, because all of a sudden, instead of Season 1, where most groups had, as I said, maybe 1 fellowship or 2 fellowships that are fairly strong, that had changed into a season where most groups had 3 or 4, even 5 or 6 active fellowships. So a wall becomes much easier to dismantle and disintegrate when you have these huge numbers to demolish into it. So as a result, trench warfare became less as an issue, which was something that I thought it may do, and instead it's just become more about these border controls and border changes. So for me, which one do I prefer? I'm fair. I'm probably, this is a draw-ish for me. It's not too much of an issue either way. Overall, what do I think? Season 1, Season 2, which one has been better? Personally, I preferred Season 1. There was an apathetic feel to maybe 1 or 2 weeks inside the middle of Season 1, where it kind of dragged towards the end and there seemed to be no end in sight of what was happening. This season, even around the Christmas time, I kind of felt a little bit lethargic towards even bothering too much with the game, whether that was because of the politics, because it was the faction, where the problem with the server, or most of these game changes that I'm discussing. I'm not entirely sure, but I feel maybe I'd be looking for something a little bit more exciting, a little bit fresher, and I'd really like to see some changes that impact the game into Season 3, rather than just much of the same. I'm kind of feeling like it needs a new map, or we really need an injection of new units, or just something to make it a little bit different from the same thing over and over again. Because at the end of the day, after the excitement of the first month, it's the same units versus the same commanders and the same stuff, and yeah. Is it really that difficult to come up with more units? Add an extra, 5 or 6 units for each side, and you'd expect to see that in most games as progression occurs here. But no new units. Nothing extra. Please, Season 3, give us something. Anyway, post a comment if you agree, disagree, if there's anything that I've missed, if there's stuff that you are hoping for in Season 3. As always, I will speak to you soon. Take care. Pleasant gaming.